Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm going to be talking about diesel heaters. If you have one, you know they require two things to run: diesel fuel and electrical power. And while there are a bunch of options for delivering the volts that they need, powering one is not entirely straightforward. I'm going to let you in on one of the most budget friendly ways to get one of these things, keeping your tent toasty all night long. So stick around. Hello and welcome. My wife Susan and I, we're on a mission to explore the byways of this country to find the food, the people, and even the odd stuff. We're exploring where the roads lead after you leave the interstates behind, and beyond where the roads end. Whether you're thinking about getting started overlanding or rocking a fully built rig, I'll be talking about the places we go and giving tips to make your journeys go smoother. And it all starts now on this episode of the Dirt Road Tourist. All right, welcome to the Dirt Road Tourist. I'm Ken, your host, and like I said, this week I'm going to be talking about diesel heaters and more specifically how to power a diesel heater. The reason why I picked this as a topic for this week is because the subject actually came up twice in a couple of the forums that I'm in and the groups I'm in on Facebook. Somebody had bought a new diesel heater and they had questions about how to actually power the thing. And it's, not as straightforward. It's a 12-volt feed for the diesel heater, but it has a couple of different stages of its operation where it has different power requirements. And the reason for that is because it has one power requirement to keep a fan moving air through the diesel heater. But it also, when it first starts up, when you first take it out and it starts up from cold, it has a glow plug internally that runs for about 2-3 minutes, somewhere thereabouts, in order to get the whole diesel thing, the combustion working. And that it draws about 15 amps whenever that glow plug is running. So people will think, oh, I'll just go get myself one of the Jackeries, one of the portable power stations, and I'll plug it into the cigarette lighter and that's how I'm going to run it. And they find it doesn't work. And then they turn out to the forums and they had questions about it. So after it came up twice, I was like, well, hey, there's a good topic to actually talk about because apparently people have questions still. The reason why a Jackery is, or some of the portable power stations, may not be the best choice to actually run a diesel heater is because of that 15 amp draw while the glow plug is going. Most of the 12-volt outlets on these things are not designed to deliver that. There's actually a safety feature. The battery unit will actually shut itself down. So they plug this thing, their diesel heater, into their Jackery. It starts up, it runs for about 15 seconds, and then the Jackery is just like, yep, nope, can't do that, I'm out, peace. And it just shuts off. And then they have to restart their Jackery. They try starting up the diesel heater. They think there's something wrong with the diesel heater or something shorting out, and that's not the case. It's just pulling more current than that 12-volt outlet, that cigarette outlet on the front of the battery is designed to be able to provide. So one way that you can get around that, and a lot of people were pointing this out in the groups there, is that you can actually use the 120-volt outlet on the front of most of these battery units, and you get a transformer, or you get a little thing that you plug into there that takes it down to a 12-volt feed. And then you can actually plug your diesel heater into that outlet, and that will deliver the kind of voltage or the kind of amperage that the diesel heater needs on startup. While that does work, yes, converting the 12-volt feed from the internal battery on that Jackery or Bluetti or whatever you've got, and then converting it over to 120 volts, and then converting the 120 volts back down to 12 volts DC is a really inefficient way to run this thing, because once the glow plug shuts off after the whole thing gets started, and then all you're running is just the fan. And the draw from one of these things goes down to about an amp or so in my experience, at least with the Viver that I own, the 8 kilowatt Viver, it drops down to about an amp. So it's really efficient and doesn't draw a whole lot. But if you're actually stepping up to 120 volts AC and then back down to 12 volts DC, it's going to take a much bigger bite out of that Jackery. And that's power that you may want to actually preserve for charging other stuff. Or we use ours mostly just for charging our phones, keeping our watches, the drones, cameras, different things charged. And that's kind of its primary duty. And we really want to have that battery, the juice from that battery, available for those. So we don't run our diesel heater off of our Jackery style battery system. One battery system that you already probably have, well, no, that you already definitely have with you on your vehicle that is capable of handling the startup voltage draw, the amperage draw for the diesel heater, is going to be the starter battery, the one that's under the hood in the front of the vehicle. You hook up alligator clips to this one, you start up the vehicle because you really want the alternator to be delivering that initial 15 amp draw rather than pulling that from the starter battery. You just basically start up the vehicle, start up your diesel heater. Once you actually hear the combustion, the diesel combustion actually up and running, you can then turn the vehicle off and just let the thing draw off the starter battery for the rest of the evening or the rest of the night. And these things will run all night because, again, it's only about a 1 amp draw just to keep the fan going to move the air up into the tent through the diesel heater. So it's not that big of a draw. And most starter batteries are going to run this just fine and still have plenty of juice in the morning to be able to turn over the truck. Where a lot of people are nervous about this, and I did this for a couple of trips, ran it off the starter battery, didn't have any problems. But this is all going to depend on how new that starter battery is, how many of those initial cold cranking amps that it was built into it, how much of those do you still have left on that thing? That's a concern. The other thing is that if you're going to be parked in a place for a couple of days, if you're planning on setting up a base camp, you probably don't want to run a diesel heater off of a starter battery for more than one night before you actually start the truck up and run it around for a while and drive it for a while, because you want to top that starter battery back off after having that kind of a draw put on it. So it's a way that you can get through a night, especially if you're planning on driving every day and doing a bunch of driving. Your starter battery will get topped back off by the alternator when you're driving and should be fine for each night whenever you're camping. And like I said, we did this for a couple of times, but I was just always a little bit leery about having that thing hooked up to the starter battery, because if it did draw the starter battery down to the point where it wouldn't turn over the truck, then you're facing a situation where you might be out somewhere, way out somewhere. Now you've got a vehicle that can't start, and there's nobody around that you can ask for, a jump start, unless you actually have one of the little portable jump start kits that you carry with you, which is a good idea to keep that in your kit as well. But if you don't want to run it off the starter battery, probably the least expensive way that you can actually bring along power for something like a diesel heater is just to get a house battery. And that does not have to, I mean, I hear you saying it's like, oh God, something like a red arc system, these things are thousands of dollars. And I'm here to tell you a house battery does not have to be that complicated of a setup. It can be something as simple as going down to Walmart and checking out some of the deep cycle marine batteries. They sell an AGM marine battery that has 100 amp hours, and these things, you have about 50% of that actual usable on an AGM style battery. So if it says it's a 100 amp hour AGM battery, plan on that actually being a 50 amp hour battery. But still, that's enough juice to be able to run a diesel heater for a good long time. So you get just one of these AGM batteries. You're going to need a way to charge it when you get home. So something like a trickle charger that you plug into the wall and hook up to the battery and charge it up in between trips so that it's ready to go for your next trip. On weekend trips, things like that, that will work just fine. These batteries run about 80, 90 bucks. I see them. I think I picked mine up for about 80 bucks, the first one that I got. And it did just great in powering our diesel heater. And what you have, another option, let me back up. Another option would be to get a LiPo. And the cost of these things has come way down in the past few years. I'm seeing 100 amp hour LiPo batteries for as little as about 150 bucks. I just was checking Walmart the other day and saw one for $149. So you can spend the 80 or 90 bucks for the AGM, or you can actually a little bit more by spending just a little bit more. You can get an actual lithium battery that will recharge a whole lot faster. And number two, when it says it's a 100 amp hour, it's a 100 amp hour. You can draw those things practically down. You can't draw them all the way to zero without damaging them, but you can draw it pretty close. So you've got really kind of double the capacity on a LiPo than you do on one of the AGM batteries. But picking up one of those things and having a trickle charger to charge it up in between trips will get you going. And what you have once you have one of these batteries is really kind of the core kernel of a house battery system for your vehicle. Because that was kind of how mine evolved. I had this AGM battery. It's 100 amp hour AGM deep cycle marine battery. On the Tacoma, there is an actual platform over on the passenger side under the hood where you can mount a secondary battery. It's a lot of people mount their air compressors there and use that for a spot to put their onboard air compressor, but a lot of people also put batteries there. And that's what I did. And then I got just a simple DC to DC charge controller. And these things connect to your house battery, and they run between that and the starter battery. And while the vehicle is actually, the ignition is on, it allows juice to flow from the alternator through the DC to DC charge controller into your house battery, keeps it charged. Whenever the ignition is turned off, it cuts the connection between the house battery and the starter battery, and it makes sure that you don't draw down your starter battery inadvertently. And I ran that for a while. And that worked great. That was great. Used that to run our refrigerator and our diesel heater, and it worked pretty well. The only problem that you run into if you have just a DC to DC charge controller is that if you're going to be parked in a place and setting up a base camp, and maybe you're doing more of a hiking style trip, and your vehicle's not going to be driving on trails every day, you're not giving enough time for the engine to turn over and actually charge that battery back up to peak. So you might be drawing it down more, especially when you put a refrigerator on it. You're probably going to be drawing that battery down more than you really want to. And the other thing that I had a problem with is that if I use like I said, the house battery runs my refrigerator, and I like using that if I'm running errands in town. If I'm going to the grocery store, I love being able to come out from the grocery store, take the cold stuff, and put it in the fridge, which keeps it cold until I get home to put it away. And if I'm just doing errands, it's not a whole lot of driving. I might only be putting, 20, 30 miles on the truck during this. That's not enough actual run time or driving time to be able to make sure I'm putting the juice back into that house battery that I was taking out of it. So I eventually ended up getting a multi-point charge controller, something that could handle taking juice in from the alternator and feeding that into the house battery, but it also allows inputs for solar panels, which I didn't use my roof rack for anything. I have plenty of storage really between the truck and the bed, so I never really put any kind of storage containers up on the roof rack. So I decided that I'm just going to use that for solar, and I picked up two 100-watt Renogy solar panels, mounted those up there, run that in through the charge controller, and I'm able to charge my house battery both with the sun if the truck is parked and it's a good sunny day. I'm making the solar is more than enough to make sure that I'm keeping that house battery topped off. But if it's a cloudy day or if I'm driving trails, I've got the alternator to back up with, so I'm covered either way. And you may be thinking, geez, Ken, this sounds like an awful lot of DIY. And it it was for the system I've got, because after I got the multi-port, the solar charger, I actually removed the battery from under the hood and moved it to the very front of the bed of the truck, mounted on top of our drawer system right behind the cab, just simply because the wiring was easier from that point, to have the battery stored there and to charge from the solar panels that were mounted on the roof. It was just easier to get the wiring to go where it needed to go. Plus, I was able to actually run some wires underneath the top cover of our drawer system, and I put a marine panel in the back of our drawer system so that we have a USB port, a USB-C port, and a 12-volt port, cigarette outlet port right there at the back of the tailgate, right where you need it for running lights, being able to plug in a phone real quick. It's really handy to have that back there and to be able to draw that off of our house battery. So it's kind of a bit of a DIY project, yes, but keep in mind that you're not having to do all of this DIY at once. It's relatively inexpensive components when you buy them individually, and you can wait for your budget to allow you to be able to purchase these things. So you're purchasing component by component. And the tip here is to actually go on something like Amazon, find the components that you want to build out your actual, dream house battery system and put them in a wish list. Because what happens if you're not actually purchasing them all at once and you have them in a wish list, you'll get notifications when some of the lightning deals and some of the sales come up on these things, and you can actually build them when, you can actually pull the trigger and purchase them when they're at their lowest cost. So you're able to build out slowly. And yes, it can be a bit of a DIY project to install all these things into the vehicle, but it's over time. You're purchasing your multi-point controller, charge controller, you're buying your solar panels at different times, and you have one project and then you're done with that. And then later, as your budget allows you to purchase the next component, you've got another little project right there, but then you get that done and so on and so forth. At after a while there, you actually have a nicely kitted out DIY house battery system. And the other nice thing is it's flexible. It can be expanded to suit your needs. So if you need to add another battery, pick up another $150 LiPo battery and you've got, 200 amp hours of battery capacity on your house system. So it's something that can expand to suit your needs as your needs grow. Plus, the other thing is that it's something that since you put it in there, you know how every component of it works. So you know how to fix it when something comes along. Oh, I know exactly where that particular part is. I know exactly where to look and where to troubleshoot. So it's easier for you to fix than if you just went out and bought a system ready to go and had it all bolted in. You don't know anything about that system, and when something goes wrong, it can be really tricky to figure out how to actually troubleshoot that bolted in system. So, building one out over time is a lot more budget friendly and gives you a much better understanding of the system that you have in place on your vehicle. But again, the initial investment on this is really, really low. All you need is a battery and a way to charge it back up in between trips. So it can be as simple as an AGM battery and a charger, a trickle charger that you plug into the wall at home, and you keep that battery ready for each time you go out on a trip. So running these diesel heaters, it does not have to be a real expensive proposition. I don't recommend, like I said, going with a Jackery or something like that. You can get one of the 120-volt adapters, and you're using an inverter to step that 12 volts up to 120 volts, and then you're stepping it back down to 12 volts. It's a terribly inefficient way to run a diesel heater. It'll work, yes, but you're not going to get nearly as much time out of it as you would if you actually were able to deliver the kind of amperage that that thing needs at startup, and then to be able to deliver that steady 12 volt, 1 amp feed for an extended period of time. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you an idea on how to do this. Like I said, as little as a little over $100, you can actually have a reliable electrical system that will run that diesel heater all winter long for you and keep you nice and toasty out on your trips. If you thought this was some handy tips right here for getting your diesel heater going, drop me a note, drop me a comment. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button because it really helps me be visible to people who are searching for this kind of information and to find the show and to be able to have access to that information that they're looking for. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you have a great week. And as always, go see something amazing.